Good evening, Zimbabwe. Welcome to Livetalk, The Connection, a platform where we discuss issues affecting young people. We are coming to you live from Studio 7 at the Voice of America in Washington this Tuesday, October the 25th, 2022. And your host tonight, I am Ivan Zeninga in Washington, D.C., standing in for my colleague, Ntungameli Nkomo. Tonight on Live Talk, we are taking a look at the SADC Anti-Sanctions Day commemorations held in Zimbabwe and across the region following the declaration by SADC countries that October 25 will be an annual solidarity day against what the region calls, and quote, illegal sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe, unquote. By Western nations, mainly the United States. About 500 people took to the streets today in Bulawayo, expressing their dismay over targeted sanctions imposed by the West on ZANU-PF officials following claims of alleged election rigging and human rights violations. Also in Harare, a group of toy-toying protesters took to the U.S. Embassy. Some marches carrying banners denouncing the sanctions, hoping that the West will remove the targeted sanctions. Meanwhile, the U.S. has indicated that it will not remove the sanctions until Zimbabwe implements electoral reforms and improves its human rights record and issues to do with the general masses' livelihood. In Botswana, a handful of Zimbabweans gathered at the Zimbabwe embassy in Gaborone to commemorate the day, where various speakers spoke of the need to remove the sanctions. Unlike in previous years, the program was dominated by Zimbabwean speakers, with only representatives from Cuba and the Sahrawi Republic delivering solidarity messages. Muchirongwa chedu chanhasi tiri kutarisa kucherechedzwa kwezuva reSADC Anti-Sanctions Day, iro rakatarwa nenyika dzemuSADC senzira yekubatsira kuti zvirango zvibviswe zvakatemerwa Zimbabwe. Vanhu vaungana nhasi pamuzinda weAmerica muHarare vachiratidzira uko vanhu vanosvika 500 vafora kuBulawayo. Kune vamwewo vanhu vaungana kuBotswana vachikurudzira kuti zvirango zvibviswe. Muzinda weBritain wati zvirango handizvo zviri kukonzera kuparara kwehupfumi hwenyika, sezvo paine vanhu 5 chete vari pazvirango izvi. And now to paint a picture of the day in various parts of the country and the region, here is a group of anti-sanctions protesters at the U.S. Embassy in Harare today. Now, that was a group of protesters protesting at the U.S. Embassy today in Harare. Also in Bulawayo, a Pastor Hove of the AFM Church had this much to say.
I stand on this ground here today, being sent by bishops of various denominations. I stand here today being sent by pastors of various churches. I stand here today being sent by evangelicals, being sent by traditional churches, being sent by Pentecostals to come and speak on the effects of the sanctions on us as the church. The first thing that I would like to say is that the church has been clear about its message since last year when our leaders, Dr. Reverend Andrew Tarnashe, went to the United Kingdom and met the Archbishop of Canterbury and appealed to him that sanctions must must be removed. Today I stand here and I said sanctions must go. Sanctions, they hurt the churches. By now, we could have built so many churches.
That was Pastor Hove right there of the AEFM Church speaking on the anti-sanctions event held in Bulawayo. And also looking at other people speaking about sanctions, Admire Masikati, a ZANU-PF youth in Bulawayo at the anti-sanctions march, also shared his thoughts.
My name is Admire Masikati, a youth from Bulawayo, a member of the ZANU-PF family. I'm here to speak about sanctions. Sanctions have affected the economy of Zimbabwe. They have affected the general populace, particularly the youth. We have no jobs, we have no industry, we have nothing, we have no income because of sanctions. People are suffering, youths are suffering. Youths have resorted to drug abuse to evade the stresses of joblessness. So today, the 25th of March, a day that has been set aside by SADC to speak against the ill-fated sanctions against Zimbabwe. We are joining the rest of SADC, the rest of Africa, to evade and challenge these sanctions that have been put forth against Zimbabwe. We are saying today, down with sanctions for the ordinary Zimbabwean citizen. We are saying today, sanctions must go. Sanctions must go because they've destroyed the economy of Zimbabwe. They've destroyed the jobs. They've destroyed the future of Zimbabwean youth. So today, as youth from Zimbabwe, we are saying sanctions must go because they've destroyed the well-being and the social fabric of Zimbabweans. As I speak today, 75% of our youth are not employed because of sanctions. 75% of our industries are not employed because of sanctions. Why not discuss on a diplomatic table the impact of sanctions and reach a consensus on these things? I think and I say,
but if I may ask you, Maskati,
yes.
They are saying they are putting sanctions because of human rights abuses. Do you agree that your party is still implementing those changes with the world requested them to change, with the world demanded to change? Are you doing any reforms or anything?
Reforms are there. The current administration is doing re-engagement and engagement. We have formed Poland, a platform where political parties sit, discuss issues that have been dealt with Zimbabwe. But still, they are putting a deaf ear to this negotiations. So as Zimbabweans, we are saying change is imminent. Change is not an event, but it's a process. So let them give an ear to Zimbabwe. Let them give us a chance to change. Because change is not an event, but it's a process.
And that was Admire Masikati, a ZANU-PF youth in Bulawayo at the anti-sanctions march, saying his mind. We also heard from the Charge d'Affaires of Sahrawi Republic, Mohamed Samba. Let's hear what he said.
Long-standing support and the honored position of the Republic of Zimbabwe towards the Sahrawi issue. Long live Zimbabwe, long live. Long live African solidarity, long live. Thank you.
That was the Charge d'Affaires of the Sahrawi Republic, Mohamed Samba, delivering his solidarity messages at the Gaborone, Zimbabwe Embassy to Botswana event in Botswana earlier today. And last but not least, Zimbabwe's acting ambassador to Botswana, Witness Ngwenya, reiterated the same message that sanctions must go.
The theme is consistent with the government's current thrust of engagement and re-engagement, aimed at renewing Zimbabwe's influence in the community of nations. Further, Zimbabwe's reform agenda is a significant component justifying why sanctions on Zimbabwe should be lifted.
Zimbabwe's acting ambassador to Botswana, Witness Ngwenya, in Gaborone, Botswana. Tanzwa zvakawanda zvanga zvichitaurwa nevazhinji vanga vachiteverera chirongwa chaswera chichiitwa nhasi mumaguta akasiyana-siyana. Tanzwa zvaitika kuHarare kuti vamacha kumuzinda weembassy yeUnited States kuHarare. Tanzwawo kuti kuBotswana kuZimbabwe embassy vaungana zvakare tikanzwa vamwe vanga vachitaura pamusoro pezvirango izvi, vazhinji vachiti ngazvibviswe, asi tinodawo kunzwa kwamuri vateereri vedu, tinodawo kunzwa kune vamwe vakasiyana-siyana vane pfungwa nemaonero avo ekuti zvirango izvi zvoitwa sei, ihondo yaani, zviri kukuvadza ani, zviri kuenda kupi, zvichimbobva nekupi. So moving on, we are joined by one of our guests for tonight. We were hoping to get as many as possible to try and discuss this amongst the youth. We are still hoping to get a guy from Triple C, Takudzwa Ngadziwore. We hope to get him very soon. We were going to keep try calling. But for now, we have Mr. Gordon Brown. I understand he's on the line. He is an entrepreneur based in Harare. He will tell us a story about how the sanctions are affecting the young people in business in Zimbabwe. Mr. Brown, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome to the program, and you have just become the first guest for tonight's show. Tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurship and what is going on with the sanctions in your business today as a young man in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much for hosting me on your show tonight. Let me just start by saying that when we talk of sanctions in Zimbabwe, there are various interpretations as to are there sanctions in Zimbabwe, and are those sanctions real? And the truth of the matter is that it doesn't matter which political affiliation that you are affiliated to, but sanctions are real, and sanctions have affected the ordinary men and women in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. When I look at the issue of sanctions, going back to the issue of sanctions, you realize that initially when sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe, to my understanding, the first sanctions that were imposed were EU sanctions on Zimbabwe. These were targeted sanctions accordingly, as they alluded to, that these were targeted or restricted sanctions against, I think this should have been about 20 government officials back in the day. However, now we've got another stage of sanctions, which are now imposed, which we call the US sanctions. The Zimbabwe Democracy and Recovery Act, which was imposed in Zimbabwe in 2001. Now, these sanctions were not targeted, so to speak, which then begs the question to then say, if these sanctions were not targeted, what were they? Because these sanctions, if they were targeted, then they were supposed to affect the people that they were intended for. But the truth of the matter is that these sanctions were not targeted because they affected every person in Zimbabwe, regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your religious affiliation, regardless of who you are. But each and every person has been affected by sanctions. Mm-hmm. Now, what do I mean when I say that each and every person has been affected? Because I want to speak from a youth perspective, a young entrepreneur. I want to speak from a business person, a young business person in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. To say that when you look at sanctions, the effect of sanctions, this does not need a rocket scientist. This does not need, a professor or a doctor to explain this. But when sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe, the biggest effect that it had was that Zimbabwe was not allowed, to borrow money from IMF. Zimbabwe was not allowed to be given money by the World Bank. And Zimbabwe was not allowed to carry any business with any financial institution in the world. Be that as it may, United States companies also were not allowed to deal with the Zimbabwean government and with companies and organizations in Zimbabwe. Now, how does this then affect me as a business person? Because, you see, when we talk of international banking law, there's what we call corresponding banking, where banks can be fined for dealing with companies that are on sanctions. Banks can be fined for dealing with countries that are on sanctions. And this therefore means that banks could not, and banks still cannot operate, and still cannot, banks still cannot deal with the business institutions that are here in Zimbabwe. And that then affects me as a business person, because I cannot borrow any money. I cannot, any company cannot lend me any money for me to carry my business transaction. Mm-hmm. Now, you realize that as Zimbabweans generally, we've lost more than 100 relationships with other banking institutions, with other banking facilities over the past 2 decades. It has been hard for us to get loans outside the country, which don't enable us to do big projects. And we've come to a point where I have to think as a business person.
Mr. Brown, you are a preacher in this ministry. I'm going to ask you to hold it there for a second. We will take a very short break, brief break, 30 seconds. We're coming back. You have a very interesting analogy to tell. We are going to continue with you as soon as we come back from the break. Let's take a short break and don't go away. We will be right back after this message.
The search is on for Africa's best and brightest minds in finance, cybersecurity, technology, and anything digital, making social impact through cutting-edge technologies, innovation, and creativity in Africa. Out of 17,000 candidates from 50 countries in North, Central, East, West, and Southern Africa, only 3 will be selected from the top 10 continental finalists from Egypt, Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Cameroon. Join the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and its prestigious partners, including the Voice of America, when the 3 finalists are featured at the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit in December 2022 in Washington. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. For those that have just joined us, please note we are streaming live on our Facebook pages, VOA Shona, VOA Studio 7, and VOA Ndebele. We are also live on YouTube as VOA Zimbabwe. As we continue with our discussion on the SADC Anti-Sanctions Day activities that took place today, we turn to young people in business to hear what they have to say. We have been speaking to Mr. Gordon Brown, who seemed to be preaching in this ministry about how the sanctions have affected them as young people in business, living and doing business in Zimbabwe. Muripo ere mkoma Gordon?
Yes, my brother.
Right. Ndinoda kuti tienderere kumberi ndombokubata ine chishona munochigona here. Right. Manga muchitsanangura inini zviri kuitika zvamabata nhau dzakawanda endererai mberi ndakubatai pahuro tanga takumboti titende kuka short break asi tadzoka handei kumberi manga muchitsanangura inini zviri kuitika nemasanctions zviri kukutadzisai kuita business munyika. Endererai zvenyu kumberi.
Sekutaura kwandanga ndichiita kuti masanctions ariko and atingatauri kuti haako because masanctions ariko and ndechokwadi. Sanctions are real and sanctions are there. Now zvamba zvatoomera chiro chidiki kuti tikwanise kuti tiite bhizinisi ipo pakaiswa masanctions munyika yedu. Ndikata tinodzokera kuchirungu chanachambotaura chacho.
Hazvina kuipa.
As young people, we've had to find our own way around sanctions. Because the moment that sanctions are imposed on a nation, and we as a country, we are not allowed to trade with any company, with any financial institutions. We cannot borrow money from any financial institution. We cannot borrow money from the IMF. We cannot borrow money from the World Bank. And, when it comes to the corresponding banking principles, whereby now, we've lost relationships with over 100 banks. It then gives us to a situation where all of these has led to an effect where, to a large extent for young people, it's very simple. If I'm just going to summarize, it's very simple for young people.
Right.
All the effects that
Let me ask you again to hold on for a second. We have people that are listening from across the world. We have a caller in South Africa who's been listening to what you have just been saying, and they said they would like to throw in a quick comment. Let's hear from from the call. And are you there, caller? Hello? Welcome to Live Talk, The Connection.
Hello, makadini zvenyu.
Tiripo makadiwo, ndiri pano ndiri kukurukura namukoma Gordon Brown pano vari kutaura nezvemasanctions kumusha uko. Tauraiwo tinzwe kuti muri kuti kudii, manzwa here zvavari kutaura?
Ndazvinzwa, but maonero angu ndeyekuti vari kunyepa. Masanctions are just targeted sanctions which some other top officials in the government must follow what the American government is saying. They are simply saying they have to implement the reforms, political reforms and economic reforms. So what is so special for them to refuse to implement reforms?
Ndo zvamuri kutaura wezvo. Vanonzi mukoma Tapiwa Kadira Mwando vari kuSouth Africa. Mavanzwa here zvavari kutaura mukoma Gordon? Vanoda kupindurwa, vasaende vasina kunzwa mhinduro yenyu. Munotiwo kudii nezvavari kutaura?
It's unfortunate kuti tine vanhu vane kamufungiro ikako pese pavanotaura nevanhu vanoona sekunge vanhu vese vanenge vachingonyepa vakanga vati vari kunyepa, asi dai vakanga vaita research yavo zvakanaka-naka, then you would then understand kuti initially we had what we called the European Union EU sanctions, which were the sanctions which were restricted to 20 government officials in 2002. However, kune vapedza kutaura ngavaende vadzokore vambonoverenga vanzwisise kuti tive nonzi zidhera anonzi ma-US sanctions, United Nations sanctions. And these sanctions are not targeted. These sanctions were imposed kuti ma-companies emuZimbabwe asakwanise kudila with companies outside the country. These sanctions were imposed kuti IMF isakwanise kupa mari Zimbabwean government, IMF World Bank isakwanise kupa mari Zimbabwean government, and the ripple effect is that kana Zimbabwean government isinakupa mari zvinoaffecta the ordinary man and woman.
Right.
I wish vanga vati ma-sanctions aya aizi mari aifanira kupiwa vanhu, asi zvakanzi ma-sanctions aya IMF will not lend money to the Zimbabwean government.
But Koma Gordon,
and if companies trade with the Zimbabwean banks, they are fine.
All right. Mukoma Gordon.
Avakataura from a perspective yemunhu anoita sokunge asina kumboenda kuchikoro. Ngavataure tichiita a debate. We want to do a debate here.
Ndikukunzwai. Ndoda kubata pamataura apo.
Tine chitoro mukati, it's from an informed point of view. Kwete kungoti vanonyepa ani. Ndokuti ndataura ndikati kana tonyema sanctions are real. Sanctions are affecting everyone. And hiyo kana vachiti vari kudzoka zvavasi kuaffectiwa, tiri kuZimbabwe tiri paground tiri kuaffectiwa, ndisati nyaya kuti sanctions have affected the ordinary men and women. Avaona mbuya vari kuno vari kuaffectiwa nemasanctions.
Vazvinzwa mukoma Gordon, ndinozokanganwa point yandinayo. Ndinozokanganwa mubvunzo wandanga ndinawo mukoma Gordon pamanga muchibata-bata nyaya apa, mabata nyaya yemabhengi. Mabhengi muri kuti ari kutadza here kupanana mari nemabhengi ari kuAmerica? Mukoma Gordon tinenge taluza mukoma Gordon. Taita mumwe muteereri here? Tinenge tiri kunzwa kuti pane mumwe muteereri ari pamhepo.
Mubvunzo wamapedzera kubvunzwa. Ndikupe example mukoma.
Thank you. Ndokai zvenyu.
And itoda kutaura zvinhu zviri factual. In 2002, the European Union was supposed to lend 128 million euros to the Zimbabwean banking institution. And this money was supposed to be given to the government of Zimbabwe bank from a period of 2002 to 2007.
All right.
However, this amount of money, 128 million, was cancelled. And those that collapsed between the period of 2004 to 2007. It was because the banking institutions used to be lended money, but this facility was withheld and cancelled. And the moment it affected the banking institutions, the moment it affected banks, it led to unemployment. Banks akavarwa, vanhu vakashaya mabasa. To this day, the banking sector has not recovered. So if we then say that this has not affected our people, what are we saying? Because the truth of the matter is that sanctions never affected Vanwainzi, they are targeted. Sanctions affected the ordinary men and women. Yes, they were not targeted, because if they were targeted, I found out that my government officials and the could affect only the targeted. But they affected the men and women. They have done that to this day.
mabata imwe angle futi papapo mukoma Gordon yandinoda kuti mutitsanangure zvakare. Tabva taita umwe muteereri muri kuteererwa mukoma Gordon nevanhu vakawanda kunzoko. Regai tinzwe kuti vari kudawo kuti kudii. Pindai zvonyu muchirongwa tinokuchingamidzai pa Live Talk The Connection. Welcome to the program. Muri kupi? Ndinofaraini kana muchifarawo zvenyu. Ndiri pano tiri kukurukura tina mukoma Gordon pari zvino vari pamhepo. Muri kuvanzwawo ka zvakanaka kwamuri ikoko? Network yenyu inenge iri kunetsa. Muri kutinzwa here? Tiri kukunzwirai kure kure. It seems we have lost that caller right there. We're going to keep trying and calling you back. Hopefully we will be able to bring you back before Mkoma Gordon goes. So Mkoma Gordon, ndandiri kuda kuti ndibvunze panyaya yamataura yekupa shoko rekuti targeted iro. People seem to say these sanctions were targeted to specific people. The president, a few other individuals, a few other companies. Asi mi muri kutaura mchiti vanhu ivava havana chiri kuva-affecta nema-sanctions, asi mhomho yeZimbabwe nemi vanhu vari kumhanyawo nemabhizinesi ndimi muri patight nezviri kuitika izvi. Ipapo imbopabatai futi zvishoma ipapo tipanzwisise zvakanaka.
Chatofanira kunzwisisa ndechekuti vanoita ma-sanctions aya vakamesera chinhu chimwe chete. Vakaisa ma-sanctions vanhu vachaomerwa neupenyu. Kana vanhu vaomerwa neupenyu vobva vati hurumende iripo hatichaida nekuti yaita kuti tiomerwe neupenyu ngatiidhisei, handiti? Asi manje dambudziko rakaitika muZimbabwe nderekuti vanhu vakaomerwa neupenyu, vanhu vakati hurumende iripo iyi toibvisa here, pamwe vamwe vakaedza zvikaramba, asi ndo ichiripo hurumende yachona yakanga yatargetwa. So the question then becomes 20 years down the line, akaiswa 2002, the 2001, this is now 21 years down the line, the US sanctions be there. Why are they still there when they are still affecting the ordinary men and women? If really the United States had interest or had got interest in the average men and women in Zimbabwe, the sanctions are supposed to be removed because they are not affecting the leadership of Zimbabwe. They are not affecting the government, the top government officials. The top government officials can fly to whichever country that they want to fly to. The top government officials can stay in whichever house that they want to stay to. They can have access to electricity. They can have access to water. But the people that are being affected, the people that have got what we call bread and butter issues, as the normal person that is in Gumbo Nchanda, the normal person that is in Buhera, the normal person that is in Angamburachikanga, those are the people that are being affected by sanctions. For us as business people, for us as young people, the normal person who has graduated, who's looking for employment but cannot find employment because due to these sanctions, companies have not recovered. There is no employment.
Mkoma Gordon.
If sanctions are removed,
Mkoma Gordon.
A place where business can thrive.
Ndoramba ndichikuisirai mabreak ndotya kuti nguva yedu inozotiperera paine nyaya yakakosha yandinoda kuti mubate tisati taenda. Briefly, what do you think should be done going forward? We are coming to the end of the show, but I would really love you to say what you think should be done as a young man in business in Zimbabwe today.
Going forward, as a country, as Zimbabwe, we're not going to sit and cry about sanctions. We have had to find our own way doing business, and we're still going to have to find our own way as a country. Zimbabwe will not be built by anyone else except us, the Zimbabweans. I
have 10 more seconds.
So we are going to continue to build our own country, brick upon brick, stone upon stone. Those that want to do
I will have to say thank you right there, Mkoma Gordon, for your time. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our show today. Time has been jealousy, but we would like to thank all of the guests and you, of course, the listeners at home, and be sure to tune in again tomorrow. This has been a lovely discussion. We hope to meet again, and we will keep talking about issues affecting the young people in Zimbabwe. And this is me, your host tonight, Ivan Zininga in Washington, saying good night, Zimbabwe. Until next time.